Welcome to the Louis J. Mascara Automotive Museum in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania. I am Dr. Stephen Neppa of the History Department at Penn State Abington, and I am here with the founder of the museum, Louis J. Mascaro.
My name is Louis J. Mascaro. I am a collector of automobiles. I've done so for the last 30 years. I'm here today with Mr. Steve Nepper. He is a professor of history, I believe.
That's correct.
At Penn State.
That's correct.
Penn State. And we're here to do a talk about my collection and what we have to offer to the public and that sort of thing.
All right. So let's start with a basic question. Clearly, given what we see in the gallery here, you have a very fond passion for automobiles and an extensive background in mechanical engineering, from what I understand. What is your earliest memory of cars?
Well, when I was about 14 years old, my father brought home a 40 Mercury sedan, and that was my first car. I seem to have an interest in mechanical things. I loved, when I was a little boy, I'd love to watch the trains go by, automobiles, trucks, even airplanes. Anything that was mechanical, I seemed to have a real interest in.
And I also learned that when you were younger in the family business, you were the one usually fixing the trucks.
Yes,
Correct?
yes, I seem to have a fairly good mechanical aptitude, and as our business grew up to a certain point, I was the only mechanic. When you have a fleet of trucks, you weld, you change engines, you do it all. And I seem to have pretty good ability, and so that's what I did to help the company.
And when it comes to cars, was there something specific about what was enticing? Was it their styling, the sound, their movement, their design?
I think it's all of what you had said. I think you covered it.
Okay. And so you did talk about your first car. It was a 1940 Mercury, and obviously these cars in the gallery aren't what we would call a daily driver. But as far as your daily driver goes, what is the car that you drive on a daily basis?
I drive a 2019 GMC pickup truck, four-wheel drive. In our climate, I believe it's, although you only use it a few days a year, it's necessary to have a four-wheel drive vehicle, at least from my point of view.
Okay. And other than your love for automobiles, are there any other reasons that you decided to establish this museum?
Well, certainly I didn't start out with that thought, but I started collecting cars when my youngest was about 16. I had a great interest in cars before I was married and had a family, but then when my youngest was 16 and kind of doing his own thing, I sort of got back into cars. I went and bought a car, and over the next 30 years, if you buy one or two automobiles a year, which I did, you have quite a bit of cars at the end of 25, 30 years. Having a museum was almost an afterthought.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you, aside from the vehicles, do you collect anything else car-related, racing
Yes.
uniforms, racing posters?
I have some of that. I have an extensive collection of automobilia, Petrofina,
Okay.
antique toys, mainly cars and trucks, and that sort of thing. So that's a hobby of mine too.
And will that be included in the museum as well?
Yes, we really only have the bare bones here now. I think the next thing we need to do is is to put some of these artifacts and toys and things into the museum here.
Yeah, I think that'll come.
They are presently in a smaller building that is on my property that holds about 20 cars, and of course this building will hold 50 or 60.
Okay.
So the goal is to slowly transfer some of that to maybe broaden the interest of people coming through here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite car in all of this collection? I mean, is there one singular, or do you love
Cars-
them equally?
Cars are like people, they have personalities. And even your very best friends and loved ones, there may be a thing or two you don't care about them. Cars are the same way. They all have their own personality. But to answer your question, yes, I have a 2005 Porsche Carrera GT. Now everything Porsche makes is a Carrera. But this is a very special limited production car, which I bought new in 2005, and it is just a lot of fun to drive. I call it a four-wheel sport bike. It sounds, drives. It's almost like one of these Japanese sport bikes. It's horribly fast, and but it's a very competent car, and yes, I do really enjoy driving it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that car you would put at the top of your list.
I would say yes. From a driver, yes.
Now, on a related note, from a driving standpoint, that's your first pick. But is there a car in the collection that you appreciate more than any other for its design, its historic value, its
Yes.
rarity?
Yes. When I was in Italy in 1996, while on vacation, I picked up a magazine, and there was a Maserati Barchetta, which in Italian is a small boat, a barchetta. And these cars look, to the Italians at least, like boats. And Maserati had made 15 of these cars for a challenge series. They were special purpose built for a race series that they did for 2 years. And their goal was to give the cars to non-professionals, for amateurs. And as it turned out, the professionals, some of the professionals got their hands on them. And the one, I saw the car in Italy, like I say, and every once in a while I would go online looking for one of these cars, although none of them were ever exported to the United States. Out of the 15 cars, after the 2-year race series, there were 7 wrecked and 9 left. And while online one night, I saw one for sale in Denmark. Well, 2 mornings later, I was on a plane to Geneva, Switzerland. And then we flew up to Denmark, my friend and myself. And to make a long story short, I bought this Maserati Barchetta. And to this day, it is the only one in North America, or the Americas, South America. The others are in Europe. I think there might be one in Australia. But it's extremely rare and extremely desirable.
So now, is there a car or cars that you would go to any length to acquire for the museum? In other words, is there one particular car that you think you still have a desire for it, you're still looking to see if one becomes available?
Well, part of my collection is supercars, which are late model, high horsepower, high performance, limited production automobiles. I try to buy something that's limited production because as far as an investment, you hedge your bet. When you buy limited production, there's much less chance of it depreciating that much More often than not, if you buy limited production special cars, at least in this economy, they seem to appreciate or maintain their value instead of depreciate, which just about all cars do, as you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have any of the cars in the collection ever been owned by a prominent collector, a celebrity, somebody of infamy? I mean, is there any kind of fame attached to any of your cars?
That's a good question. That's big to certain collectors. I can think of one collector I know that has all his automobiles are either famous race cars, or they're owned by celebrities, or were owned by celebrities, and that sort of thing. I was never really big on that because I think the car is the celebrity.
Sure.
We're not here to celebrate Joe Smith. We're here to celebrate the automobile. That's just myself. To answer the question specifically, I owned one car that a celebrity was after, and I outbid him to buy it. Big deal. This Bugatti I have, which again is very rare and desirable, I had to bid on that car, and it just so happened that a celebrity also bid on the car, but I was the high bidder.
Okay.
Big deal.
You got it.
So I really celebrate the cars. The cars are the celebrity, not the celebrities.
Fair enough. And now, have you ever at any time with your collection, have you sold one car to acquire another? In other words, you had to think, well, there's a car I really want badly, and I'm willing to part with this vehicle to get
I have done that. Early on. But normally, no. I really am not a dealer. I'm a collector. I don't even pay it. If you want to know the truth, I don't pay attention to the current market value of the cars. I could care less whether the thing appreciated, depreciated, or remained the same. I buy the cars because I have a love and appreciation for them. They're like fine art. You know, you don't buy art to make money, you'll lose your butt. But if you buy the right stuff and you hold on to it, years later you usually do okay. And that's my philosophy with the cars.
Okay. Now, what the most recent additions to the gallery? Can you talk about those?
Okay. When I was a kid, my neighbor had a 57 Corvette, 1957. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And I just thought that was the most beautiful car. It was green or turquoise rather, like a robin egg blue with white coves, which are the insets in the sides of the car. It was a fuel injected, 4-speed, positive traction rear end. And back in 1967, as far as I was concerned, that's about as good as it got back then. So I always had a spot in my heart for that car. It wasn't only till very recently I found out from a friend of a friend there was one available, fairly local. It was in the Allentown area. This is another collector. He has about 20 vehicles, and he's an older gent, and he wanted to lighten up his scale down somewhat. So I guess to make a long story short, I went and looked at it, and it's a very nice car. And there wasn't 50 people looking at it to buy it. It was a private deal, and that's the best way to buy them if you can. This way, you're not getting into bidding wars with people.
Sure.
So I recently acquired the car within the last 3 or 4 weeks, I guess.
All right.
And it's a car that it's one of 3 cars that I wanted my whole life. 3.
And do you have all 3 now?
I have 2 of the 3.
What's the one you're missing?
The one I'm missing is when I was a kid, I had a '69 Camaro, 427 4-speed. And when I was I was in my late teens, early 20s. And I guess I was running on adrenaline then, but I ran with a bunch of guys that we raced each other, and, you know, thank God I'm still alive. But so I had this 427 four-speed Camaro, 425 horsepower, and it served me well. It was pretty much, well, there's always someone faster, but locally I was pretty much unbeatable. That same year, General Motors built about 243,000 Camaros in '69. It was quite a lot of them. But they only built 69 of them with an aluminum engine. And the designation was a ZL1. Same thing as I had, same thing, but it's all aluminum engine, which a couple hundred pounds lighter. I never bought, a local dealer had one. Boris Chevrolet in Norristown had one come in, but those days I was interested in raising my family and work and business, and I let it go by. Well, today out of the 69, there's only 31 in existence, and maybe only a handful of them have the original block, because they did have problems with the block shifting, and many of them went bad. So to have that car is one thing, but to have that car with the original block, there's maybe a handful, 5, 6, 7 of them. I did run across one a couple years ago, but I was a little late. By the time I called the guy, he had just sold it. But that's one car that I wanted, I had a desire for 50 years, but I was never really able to this day to attain one. Today it's less important to me because I have the other two, plus I'm no spring chicken, and I'm kind of cutting back on new acquisitions.
Plus they say 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
No, 2 out of 3 is not bad.
All right, so as far as the maintenance of the cars, the upkeep for the cars, can you talk about how that's done? Who looks after the cars?
Yes. The worst form of abuse with any automobile is neglect. That's worse than beating the hell out of them. So the cars have to be started on a somewhat regular basis, and I try to do that. I always add some fresh gas. I never put much gas in them, but always adding fresh gas. And I do put additives in them. And my nephew, my sister's oldest son, Rob Vendetti, he's an ace mechanic. He can do just about anything that needs to be done, whether it's a Ford or a Ferrari, he can do it. I don't drive the cars that much, so they really don't require a lot of regular maintenance. Maybe drive them, start them once in a while. It's good to go out and put a few miles on them, just a few miles. And they require regular maintenance, oil changes and that sort of thing. But that's the extent of it. I'm not running a fleet of taxis here, you know. Yeah.
Now, is there a reason or reasons that you chose to locate your museum here in Birdsboro?
That's a good question. The few reasons are that the lot that I built that we built the museum on was a lot that we owned, my family and I. The borough of Birdsboro was very excited about me locating the museum in Birdsboro, which made the land development process easier, because when a town wants you, they have a tendency to push the thing through without a lot of adversity. So they really worked with us and were very good to us as far as siting the building.
Okay. That's important, certainly. Speaking of automotive museums, other than your own, do you have a favorite? Is there one in anywhere in the world that you think is the finest example of a car museum?
I really haven't been to that many museums. I've seen them on television. I have visited a few in my years. I would say there's probably two. I was at the Hershey Museum within the last 18 months or so, and they've done a real nice job there. The Hershey Museum is something to see. The other I have never seen, it's in California, is the Peterson Automotive Museum. And that's the cat's meow. That's about as good as it gets. They have an exquisite collection of automobiles. And someday if I get out there, I'd like to go through the Peterson Museum.
Yeah, I bet that would be something.
Yeah.
Now, when visitors come to the gallery, do you want them to just look at the cars and be amazed, or are there other things that you want them to think about as they walk through the gallery?
I'm not sure. This museum is nothing that I was thinking about. It just kind of happened. There are tax advantages to owning a museum.
Sure.
It got to the point where I got so many cars, and I also had friends and family tell me that I should have a museum. And as it turned out, later in life, I put the thing into shoe leather. As far as what I expect, I'm not sure. I'm sure people will come and everyone will get something different out of it. Some people like certain things. I have some motorcycles. Some people are motorcycle buffs. Some people are miniature toy buffs. And I'm hoping that I have enough here to make it exciting enough for people to come through here.
Okay, fair enough. You talked a little bit about your racing days when you were an avid racer. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, again, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, when I didn't have a family, I took this 69 Camaro to the drag strip, Maple Grove mostly, which is a local strip here, maybe 10, 12 miles from here. And I raced it on weekends. I wasn't an avid racer. I may have raced it 15, 20 times over several years, but I did have a lot of fun taking that car to Maple Grove mainly, and competed in a stock class, a stock automobile class, which was very limited to what you could do to the car. It was for amateurs, as opposed to these professionals, which can, sky's the limit, you know. And I had a lot of fun drag racing the car. I have some trophies. I would work during the week, after work, getting the car ready for the next weekend, which was mainly tuning and changing gear ratios and minor things. And I had a lot of fun racing that. Again, that's why I have a fondness for that Camaro.
Okay. I understand it was I don't know much personally about the history of local racing, but I understand that in the Allentown area, the Reading area, drag racing was a big deal. I mean, it's kind of part of the culture up here. And I had assumed that was maybe one of the reasons you located the museum here, other than the town, of course, was very welcoming. But, I mean, do you think that has something to do with the museum here? It kind of pays homage to the racing traditions in the area?
I'd like to say yes, but the truth is no.
Okay.
You're right. The Reading, this area of Pennsylvania has a rich history, tradition in racing. Of course, one of the nationally prominent tracks that I already mentioned, Maple Grove, is literally in our backyard. but also the Reading Fairgrounds for years ran stock cars, which is one term is a roundy round racing as opposed to drag racing, which is a straight line quarter mile, dead stop to finish. But Reading, you're correct. Again, the Reading, southeastern Pennsylvania has a tremendous rich history in racing. There was Hatfield, Pennsylvania, had stock cars. Saratoga, Pennsylvania, which is right down the street here, had a very, very popular drag racing, stock car racing track. US 1 in Langhorne had a nationally prominent track, and there was others. So you're right, there is a rich tradition in racing. From my standpoint, I was never professional. It wasn't my vocation, maybe just an avocation.
Did you ever want it to become professional?
No.
You
Discretion is the greater part of valor, they say. And when these cars go 150, 180 miles an hour on a racetrack, and I don't have to go 150 or 180 miles an hour.
It's nice to know you could, though.
I could. I like to say it like this: you can have a couple 9mm on your hip pocket, but you don't have to go around blowing holes in everything. You know what they'll do.
That's a fair analogy. So, looking at the collection currently, you have a very healthy dose of Italian cars, a very healthy dose of German cars,
Yes.
a very healthy dose of American cars. And my question here would be, is there a reason you focus on those? For example, there aren't many cars made by English makers or Japanese makers.
Correct. It's true.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes. I'm just not fond of most English cars. Your daily drivers, and although they have marks such as McLaren, which is world renowned, but Datsun, Nissan, and Toyota, and the horsepower is in America, not in England, for the most part, in my opinion.
Sure.
Probably have some people disagree with that, but the average car in England is not a performance automobile. That's pretty much fact. I started out buying Italian cars, exotics. I have 3 Ferraris. I'll just say this: when you buy a German car, it's over. You just clean it and drive it. When you buy an Italian car, it's just the beginning.
Meaning you were going to...
Meaning that you're going to do more maintenance on it. It's going to be more expensive. And in my opinion, a Ferrari, I have 3 of them, I believe is probably one of the most overrated, overpriced cars in the world. They do have their history, but from my personal experience, they're overrated and overpriced. And I don't really plan on buying any more Ferraris than what I have.
Has Ferrari, you think, improved in later models?
Absolutely.
Your models are older.
Absolutely. Anything that's pre-Fiat Ferrari is basically what I'm speaking of. Anything that Enzo Ferrari and his little group produced. He, as you probably know, he produced street cars to support his racing habit. That's why there's not a lot of, not thousands and thousands of most. Now, when he passed on and Fiat eventually absorbed Ferrari, they're light years ahead. They're light years ahead. But, for example, I have 2 cars, a Dodge Viper, I think it's a 19 or an 19 maybe, And I also have a ZR1 Corvette, which is a 19. And according to the books, not me, according to the magazines and the engineers and the test drivers and the guys that do this every day, all day, these two cars I have will outperform any Ferrari on a racetrack. Now, I'm not talking about the purpose-built Formula One cars. That's a different breed of cat. You know, that's strictly racing only, but your Ferrari street cars can be easily outperformed by American and other make cars. And again, they're very high maintenance.
The Italian cars. The Italian cars are the
I found that out. I like this, sounds a little chauvinistic, but all Ferraris, in my estimation, are females.
temperamental. I think you had mentioned this earlier, but would you say that Germany makes the finest cars overall?
From my experience, I believe yes. German engineering is now the Italians are artistic. Their designs are very artistic, very leading edge, and they're outstanding. The Italian designs, Ferrari, and their motorcycles, and they have the leading edge on, and their engineering is not almost, it's artistic. But if you want it to hold up, you want a German. In my estimation, you're much better off from a cost of ownership standpoint. At least from my experience, you're better off with a German car or an American car. I think American cars have gotten a bad rap over the decades. I think currently the American cars are good or better than anything built in the world. The metallurgy, they don't leak oil anymore. They start. They don't require a lot of maintenance, tune-ups and things. And but leading edge, I prefer the German cars because of the solid engineering and the low maintenance.
And among the German cars, does Porsche make a better car than Mercedes-Benz? Or are they not equal?
I don't really like answering. I'll answer the question this way. I've had a lot less problems with my Porsches than I have with my Mercedes. I have 3 Mercedes, and I have a lot less maintenance problems with the Porsche.
And
in my estimation, it is the finest built German automobile.
And when it comes to maintenance, you say, is it electrical? Is it mechanical? I mean, these cars, some of these cars are quite advanced in terms of their electrical systems. And from what I've read, some problems that owners have with these cars are less in the engine and more in the computer processing unit. I mean, have you had that experience?
Yes and no. When you read the magazines, the average driver, whether it's an English car, American car, German, Italian, this stuff's pretty good today. The electrical is vastly improved because of the computer, I imagine. And I think the cars are getting better and better and better as far as electrical problems are concerned. I don't have a lot of electrical problems with the newer cars I have. The newer, the less problems.
That's fortunate.
Not to say that there isn't problems, but from my experience, not a whole lot.
Now, among the cars in the gallery, probably I think this question would be more specific to the newer examples. But as I was doing my research on your collection, and I had mentioned this to you earlier in the day, each car seems to be faster than the next. And I actually was enjoying the research because one of the most important elements of each car, at least in the explanations that'll be in the gallery, everybody wants to know. How fast is it? What is its horsepower? What is its 0 to 60? And are there things other than its speed that appeal to you? In other words, I thought they're all kind of grouped together because all of these cars can easily vie for some of the fastest on the planet. But is there more to it than
That's a good question. It may seem like I buy cars that are faster and faster and more higher performance, but as time goes on, Steve, the cars do get better and better performance. So naturally, the newer automobiles are going to outperform the older ones.
Okay, now, this is a question I think a lot of people would like to know. What's the fastest car in the gallery? And how do you determine that?
Well,
Is it simply horsepower?
Well, that's another really good question. Performance. How fast? How fast on the drag strip? How fast around the road course? How fast around the NASCAR course? Do you see what I'm saying?
It's not as simple as you might think.
Yeah. So some of the automobiles are very fast on the drag strip. Others are extremely capable on a road course. Other cars are very extremely fast or outperform the rest on a oval or quad oval or triangle course, such as your NASCAR courses, which are ovals, quad ovals, a couple, tri-oval, and that sort of thing. So, and the cars are set up different for different types of racing. You know, that's why there is drag racing. That's why there is a stock car racing. That's why there is road course racing. That's why there is NASCAR racing. That's why there is Formula One racing.
All right.
Hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple more. So, is there a particular arrangement of the cars in the gallery? Now, from my glance here, the Ferraris are with the Ferraris, the Porsches with the Porsches, the American with the American, the German with the German.
You pretty much figured it out, Steve.
Okay.
It's I wouldn't, depending on, I guess it's part of its the reason is this. When people come in, they may like a car for a much different reason than I do.
Sure.
So it really doesn't make any, well, to me, it doesn't, the easiest and best way to do it is to do it by mark. Do it by make, and I'm not going to put the fastest to the slowest because it may not be accurate,
Right.
and it may be someone else's opinion, what's the fastest to the slowest. I can only go by my own experience.
Okay. And lastly, this is, I think, the most contemporary question I'll ask you. How do you feel about what we're seeing in automaking now with an emphasis on electric cars, hybrid engines, Tesla? I mean, have you any interest in electric cars? I mean, everything here is internal combustion.
Well, I do have one hybrid. It's a Model 918 Porsche. It was produced in 2015. Okay. There was only 918 of them built for the world. Out the door, it was about $1 million, which was quite a lump for me to swallow. I managed to pay for it eventually. It is a hybrid. It has a 605 horsepower V8 internal combustion engine, and it has two electric motors, one driving the rear of the car and one driving the front. One is 130 some horsepower in the rear, I believe, and one is 120 some horsepower is the front motor. Altogether, when the gas engine is running and the electric motors, there are different modes. You can run it gasoline only, you can run it electric only, you can run half and half or 3/4, 1/4. It was pretty much an engineering exercise, I believe, for Porsche. Just as a side note, the cars are worth double what they sold for in 2015. One interesting side note also is out of the 900 and some that were sold, there are less than 200 original owners, according to Porsche. I'm one of the original owners. I'm not a dealer. When I buy it, I don't have I buy it, I own it. You know, I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm not interested in trading cars and that sort of thing. But to directly answer your question, electric is definitely the wave of the future. Electricity is a hell of a lot cheaper than oil. You don't have to be a scientist to know that.
Well, from all those points are correct, but if there is a moment when electric is the predominant way of propelling a car, will something be lost in translation?
Absolutely.
You're forsaking something, I think.
Absolutely. Certain things will be lost to history, and there'll always be historians such as yourself. I do believe electric is the wave of the future. The future is going to be everybody's going to be in the air. That'll be beyond my years.
And mine too, I hope.
But I think they said, one source said by 2035, they want to eliminate internal combustion engines. And I believe from what I've seen, the progress they're making and how fast they're making it, I believe that's very doable. The Tesla is phenomenal. These cars are approaching 300 miles on a charge. And I think it's probably only the battery technology that stops that. Who knows where it'll end?
Sure. And that's one of the great things about your museum, because if and when that day comes and we're all now fully electric, then this is all an homage to a kind of historic
It'll be lost to history.
but preserved well.
I think the internal combustion engine served mankind very well, and continues to serve mankind very well. But with the pollution problems and the population problems, and absolutely the electric, at least one way of doing it. I believe electrics are the wave of the future, and ultimately we'll be in the air, and we'll have electronics keeping us apart, so we don't kill each other. There'll be electronics. You know, there'll be what's the word? Waves, or
Well, the sensors that they currently have on our cars
will
now
keep
say
everybody from
bump
killing
into
each other.
bump into a tree.
And I believe that's certainly beyond my years.
Mr. Muscara, how many cars are in the collection? I mean, I know we have trucks, we have motorcycles, so how many
Yeah, vehicles.
total?
Yeah, 52 and counting.
Count.
52 automobiles. I have about 10 motorcycles. Out of the 52 vehicles mentioned, I have 5 pickup trucks, and most of them are sports cars, Mustangs, that sort of thing. And then I believe maybe a quarter of the collection are the exotics, are the supercars, and a modern term that they're using now is a hypercar.
Yes.
And I believe I only have one hypercar, and that would be my Ford GT, my 2019 or 2020, I guess it is, Ford GT, which was very hard to attain. They had about 7,000 applications for the car, and for the initial 500 cars. I believe they built about 1,000 or so, and unbeknownst to me why I was selected to get one of the cars. I certainly don't have any sort of prominence in the automotive industry, but part of Ford's 12 or 14 page questionnaire, which I had to fill out to apply, and there were some very notable people that did not get these cars. But because of who knows why, I was selected to get a car.
I think it's worth asking also, what is the difference between a supercar and a hypercar?
Whew, good question. As I can figure it out, a hypercar, I don't know if there's any real formal definition, but a hypercar, I'm sure you'd get 5 different answers if you asked 5 different automotive experts. A hypercar, as I understand it, is a car that has extremely high horsepower, extreme performance, and probably extreme limited usage.
Okay, so it's something you would not drive every day.
No,
Or maybe even
where a
every week.
supercar, if you have any sense at all, you can drive it on the road. If you don't have a lot of good common sense, I wouldn't recommend driving a supercar
Sure.
because you could get hurt, you know.
And in terms of the museum, how large is it? How many square feet is your display space?
Yeah, the museum, counting both floors and the garage, which is an adjunct to the back of the museum, it's a separate entity. I don't want to be working on cars in here,
Understand.
you know. It's about 31,000 square feet, about 3/4 of an acre under roof, and it's full already.
Impressive. All right, well, Mr. Mascara, that's all the questions I have, and I'd really
Okay.
like to thank you for your time and the ability to look at your.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
Pleasure. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.